Hey warrior, there is a certain stillness in the desert before the wind begins to rise. It feels safe at first. The dunes lie quiet, the sky wide and forgiving. But then, a faint whisper brushes your ear. It is not the sound of danger. Not yet. It is the soft rustle of sand beginning to move. You stand at the edge of an ancient marketplace. The air smells faintly of myrrh and warm bread. Merchants call out from under colorful awnings, their voices weaving through the crowd like threads of a great tapestry. One of these merchants is a woman dressed in flowing silks, her smile warm, her words sweet as dates dipped in honey. At first, every promise she makes feels like gold, clear, certain, trustworthy. You lean in to listen, feeling that rare comfort of being understood. But as days pass, you notice something strange. The memory of her words changes like shifting dunes. Yesterday she told you the price of her goods was fixed, unchanging. Today she swears she never said such a thing. Last week she spoke of an agreement you both shared. Today she looks puzzled, as though the thought had never crossed her mind. You begin to wonder if perhaps you misunderstood. Maybe the heat of the day clouded your hearing. Maybe your memory failed. But deep down you know your memory is clear. It is her words that are not anchored. Warrior, this is the first sign, a pattern of shifting narratives. It may begin subtly, a small change in a story here, a gentle revision there, but over time the sand piles higher, until you can no longer see where truth begins and untruth ends. The Stoics taught that words are the reflection of the mind's order. When a person's words are steady, their mind is steady. When words shift to suit convenience, there is no bedrock beneath them, only sand. In the marketplace, you try to anchor yourself. You begin writing down her promises in a small leather-bound book. When she changes them, you point gently to the record. She laughs, a soft sound, and says, "You must have misunderstood," and somehow her tone makes you question yourself again. This is how the shifting sands work, warrior. They do not shout or shake the earth. They move quietly, little by little, until the ground you stand on is no longer solid. You recall a story from the old philosophers, of a sailor who trusted a map that changed each morning. The harbors were drawn in different places. The dangerous reefs moved from one shore to another. The sailor's voyages became longer, his supplies thinner, his spirit worn. In the end, it wasn't the storms that broke him. It was the quiet uncertainty of never knowing which way was true. So it is when you trust the words of someone whose truths shift to match the winds. One day you may realize you've been navigating without a fixed star, your compass pulled by an unseen hand. The gentle danger here, warrior, is that you may begin to adapt. You may learn to bend your own truths just to avoid the dissonance. You may tell yourself it's easier to let the sand shift than to hold the line. But the Stoics remind us, truth is the foundation of peace. When words cannot be trusted, your spirit remains in constant defense, like a soldier standing guard through endless nights. It is exhausting. In the marketplace, the sun begins to dip. Shadows stretch across the sand, long and wavering. The merchant's voice still flows through the air, pleasant and persuasive. But you no longer hear only her words. You hear the soft hiss of the wind moving grains beneath your feet. You take a step back, not in anger, but in awareness. You do not accuse. You do not shout. You simply begin to see. Warrior, the shifting sands will not stop moving. But you can choose where to plant your feet. And as the evening call to prayer echoes softly over the marketplace, you turn toward the narrow street that leads deeper into the old city. Somewhere ahead, past these winding paths, lies another sign, one that will teach you how light can be stolen without a single word. The narrow street carries you away from the market's noise. The air is cooler here, scented faintly with jasmine vines that curl along the walls. Your footsteps echo softly on stone worn smooth by centuries. Warrior, some lessons arrive in whispers, not shouts. The first sign, shifting words, teaches you to question what you hear. The second teaches you to guard something deeper. Your own light. You turn a corner and find yourself before a tall, whitewashed tower. Its lantern burns at the top, sending a steady beam across the darkening sea. Beside the tower stands an old lighthouse keeper, his face lined like the folds of a well-used map. He greets you with a quiet nod and motions for you to follow him up the spiral stairs. Each step creaks underfoot. Above, the golden glow of the lantern grows stronger. It feels good to move toward the light. Steady, unchanging, warm. When you reach the top, the sea spreads out before you in all directions, an endless, breathing expanse. The light turns slowly, touching every horizon. The keeper tells you something curious. Years ago, another woman visited this lighthouse. At first, she spoke of admiration for its brightness. She praised how it guided sailors to safety. But slowly, she began to make small remarks. Do you think it's too bright? Perhaps it draws the wrong ships. Maybe the beam should turn slower. You don't want to seem desperate to help. You shine so much, you might make other lighthouses feel small. The keeper chuckles without joy. He explains that her words were not direct attacks, but clouds drifting across the sun. One by one, they dimmed the light. Eventually, he began closing the shutters earlier each night, doubting the value of his own beam. Warrior, this is the second sign, a subtle diminishing of your spirit. A toxic presence may never tell you outright, stop shining. Instead, they cast shadows in ways that feel almost caring. They will frame it as concern, humility, or balance. But the effect is the same. Your light grows smaller, not because it was wrong to shine, but because someone convinced you that shining fully might harm the world. The Stoics warned that a person's virtue, their courage, their generosity, their joy is like a flame. If you guard it well, it can warm others without burning out. But if you let others tell you it is too bright, too warm, too constant, you will begin to dim it for their comfort. Down below, waves roll against the breakwater. They are patient, unhurried. No matter how many times they are pushed back, they return. The keeper reminds you that unlike the tide, your light will not return on its own once you've hidden it too long. You must choose to open the shutters again. You think back to moments when your joy was met, not with celebration, but with a faint frown. When your victories were met, not with applause, but with a carefully placed question that made you doubt their worth. And you realize the danger here is quiet. You may not even notice the dimming, until one day you can no longer see the shore. The keeper looks out toward the sea, his eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. You cannot save a ship in the dark, he says simply. Warrior, protecting your light is not pride. It is a duty to yourself and to those who navigate by it. You step back from the lantern and begin the slow walk down the spiral stairs. Each step feels steadier, as though you've reclaimed something you didn't know you'd lost. At the base of the tower, the keeper clasps your hand. His grip is firm, his smile faint but genuine. The road ahead bends toward a distant bridge. It arches over a slow-moving river, its reflection shimmering under the lantern's reach. Somewhere on that bridge, you will learn the third sign, a truth about those who never forget your faults, yet seldom remember your kindness. And so you walk toward it, the lighthouse's beam at your back, and the promise of understanding just ahead. The bridge rises before you, its arches smooth and pale against the fading light. The river beneath moves lazily, carrying with it the last warmth of the day. You step onto the wooden planks, each one humming softly under your weight, as though they've carried many quiet conversations across the years. Warrior, by now you have learned the shifting nature of words and how shadows can dim your light. The third sign you must recognize is different. Not about changing stories or stolen brightness, but about the way memory can be used as a chain. Halfway across the bridge, you find a man seated at a small wooden table. Before him lies a thick ledger bound in dark leather. Its pages are covered with lines of deep red ink. Each line is precise, deliberate, written in the careful hand of someone who does not forget. He greets you politely and gestures for you to sit. You ask what he is recording. He replies that this ledger contains every error, misstep, and imperfection of those who pass this way. He does not speak of kindnesses or victories, only faults. You glance at the pages and feel a weight in your chest. There are no margins for balance, no columns for good deeds. Only a list without end, where mistakes live forever. Warrior, this is the third sign, a heart that remembers only where you have fallen and rarely where you have risen. A toxic presence will sometimes keep such a ledger in their mind. They will recall in perfect detail the day you were late, the time you forgot, the word you misspoke. But the days you stood strong for them will fade from their memory like morning mist. The Stoics spoke often of the danger of such imbalance. Epictetus taught that to dwell only on faults is to distort the truth. For a life to be judged fairly, both shadows and light must be seen together. But the keeper of the endless ledger does not wish for balance. Their record is a weapon, subtle but sharp. When they bring up the past, it is not to heal it, but to remind you of the ground you once stumbled on. And over time, warrior, this can make you walk with smaller steps, as though you expect to fall again. The man at the table turns a page, his eyes never lifting from the red ink. You notice that the entries are not written in the order they occurred. Instead, he groups them by weight, placing the heaviest ones on top, so they are always closest to memory. Even the smallest misstep, once recorded, is pulled forward when it serves the point he wishes to make. You realize the danger when the only story told of you is a story of error. Your own memory begins to agree. You start to forget the times you succeeded, the times you brought joy, the moments when your intentions were pure. But here is the truth. Warrior, a fair heart keeps a balanced book. It may remember faults, but it also cherishes the good. It does not measure worth only by the moments you faltered. The river below carries leaves and fragments of petals. They drift past without resistance, never returning upstream. So too should our mistakes be, noted, learned from, and then allowed to flow away. You thank the man for showing you his ledger, though the weight of it lingers in your thoughts. As you step off the bridge, you notice the sound of the river fading behind you, replaced by a faint emptiness in the air, as though something that connected two hearts has quietly been removed. Ahead lies a stretch of land where a bridge once stood, but now is gone. Its absence leaves a gap, a space too wide to cross, without help. This, warrior, is where the fourth sign waits, the sign of connection withheld, of affection withdrawn, like a vanished crossing over deep waters. You stand at the edge of an open gap where a bridge once connected two banks. Stone foundations remain on either side, weathered but firm. Yet between them lies only air and the slow, dark swirl of the river far below. Warrior, a missing bridge is not always the result of storms or decay. Sometimes it is removed with purpose to keep another from crossing. And so it is with the fourth sign, the deliberate withdrawal of connection when displeasure takes root. You move along the bank, and there, just beyond a cluster of reeds, you meet an old mason sitting on a low stool. He polishes a single block of stone, his hands rough and stained with years of work. When you ask him about the vanished bridge, his voice carries the tone of someone who has seen this before. He explains that once there was a crossing here, strong and beautiful. It was not made only of stone, but of trust, built slowly between two people who wished to meet each other halfway. One day, after a disagreement, one of them decided to remove a plank from the center. It was meant to be temporary, just a pause, a way to remind the other of their mistake. But soon, a second plank was taken, then a third. With each absence, the gap widened. Eventually, the bridge was gone entirely, and neither could reach the other without risk. Warrior, in human bonds, this is known as emotional withdrawal. It appears when affection, communication, or warmth is withheld, not because it is truly gone, but because it is being used as leverage. A toxic presence may step back into silence, not to find peace, but to create unease in you. They may close their heart's gate, waiting for you to approach in guilt, in apology, even when the fault is shared or not yours at all. The Stoics spoke of the harm in such acts. They believed that connection should be given with sincerity, not traded like a coin in a market. To retreat in order to punish is to value pride above harmony, and power above love. You imagine the vanished bridge in its former strength, the planks warm from the sun, the handrails worn smooth by touch. It was a place where meeting halfway was not a burden, but a joy. And now, there is only the slow churn of water, whispering of distance. The mason points to the remaining stones on your side. They could be used to build again, he says softly, but not by one person alone. That truth settles heavy within you. For a bridge is a shared work. If one builds while the other tears down, the gap will never close. You can stretch yourself toward them, leaning over the edge, but without their reach in return, you will only tire, your balance at risk. As you thank the mason and move on, you realize the danger of living near such a vanished crossing. You might spend months, even years, trying to rebuild it alone, pouring your strength into something that cannot stand unless both hearts commit. The path ahead bends away from the river, leading into the outer streets of a quiet city. Tall, arched windows glow faintly from within, their light spilling out into the dusk. You follow the sound of distant music, drawn toward a great hall where voices rise in laughter. There you will encounter the fifth sign, one that wears the mask of warmth, a facade that glows in public but cools to shadow in private. The city's streets are alive with the hum of evening. Lanterns sway gently from iron hooks, casting warm circles of light across the cobblestones. The faint scent of roasted almonds drifts through the air, mingling with the sound of distant music. Warrior, there is a kind of warmth that feels real when the world is watching, yet fades the moment the doors close. This is the fifth sign, a public face of harmony that hides a private chill. You follow the music to a grand hall whose open doors spill laughter into the night. Inside, a long table stretches beneath chandeliers of crystal. The air is bright with conversation, the clinking of cups, and the smell of spiced wine. At the far end of the table sits a woman in a gown of deep emerald. She greets you with a smile that could light the whole room. Her laughter rings easily. Her words are gracious, and her eyes sparkle with attention for each guest. Here, in the glow of many witnesses, she seems the very image of warmth. But the Stoics remind us, the measure of a person is not in how they act when the crowd is near, but in the quiet of the unobserved moment. As the night deepens and the guests begin to leave, the hall empties. The music fades to a soft hum. The servants gather the last of the dishes, and shadows grow along the high walls. You notice it then, a subtle change. The smile softens, but not into gentleness. The voice that was lively now grows sparse. The warmth cools as if the fire in the hearth has been allowed to burn low. Warrior, this is the mask of harmony. Some can wear it flawlessly in public, a mask shaped from charm, courtesy, and the performance of care. But when the need for the mask is gone, the true temperature of the heart reveals itself. And if that heart carries disdain, disinterest, or quiet hostility, you will feel it most in private. The danger here is in the contrast. When public warmth is followed by private cold, you may begin to doubt your senses. You might wonder if you imagined the chill, since the world sees only the glow, or you might blame yourself, thinking something you did dimmed the light you saw earlier. The philosophers warned against being deceived by appearances. A single evening of kindness cannot outweigh a pattern of withdrawal behind closed doors. True harmony exists where warmth is steady, where public and private faces are one and the same. You recall the lighthouse keeper's words from before, a light that shines only when others are looking is not a guide, but a signal. It does not lead you safely home. It calls attention for a purpose of its own. As you leave the hall, you pass through a narrow archway into the cooler air outside. The night is quiet here, the music a faint memory behind you. You walk alone beneath the lanterns, thinking of how masks can be beautiful, yet still hide what matters most. Ahead, the street opens into a harbor. The tide is low, the sand glistening under the moon. Boats rest on the wet earth, their ropes slack, and it is here, warrior, that you will discover the sixth sign, the truth of a tide that draws much from you, but rarely returns. The harbor lies before you. Silvered by moonlight, the tide has gone out, leaving boats tilted in the sand, their keels resting on the earth instead of the water. The air is rich with the scent of salt and distant rain. Warrior, there is a rhythm to all healthy bonds, a giving and a receiving, like the tide that comes and goes. But the sixth sign is different, a current that flows only one way, taking without returning. You walk along the water's edge until you find an old fisherman repairing his nets. His hands move slowly, looping coarse thread through worn gaps. When you greet him, he gestures toward the sea. There was a tide once, he says, that always came to meet me. It would bring fish to my nets, shells to my shore, and cool water to the sand. But over the years, it changed. It still pulls from me, the sand, the shells, even my boat when I am not careful. But it no longer returns what it once gave. His words settle in your chest. You picture relationships like that tide. A toxic presence may receive your time, your energy, your listening ear, your small acts of love. Yet when you are in need, they are distant, unavailable, or dismissive. Not once, not twice, but as a pattern. The Stoics would tell you this is not a matter of keeping score. Life is not a ledger of favors, but rather of balance. When the flow is always outward from you, without replenishment, your spirit becomes like the harbor tonight. Boats stranded, waiting for water that never comes. The fisherman explains that such a tide changes slowly. At first, you may not notice. The withdrawals are small, a request here, a little more time there. They may be wrapped in gratitude, making you feel good for giving. But over time, the giving becomes expected, and the returning becomes rare. You think of times when your needs were met with silence, or when your moments of struggle were overshadowed by their demands. You remember pouring yourself into their comfort while your own weariness went unseen. Warrior, the danger here is not only in what is taken from you, but in what you begin to withhold from yourself in order to keep giving to them. The Stoics taught that you must first be the keeper of your own well-being, or else you have nothing real to offer others. The fisherman knots the last gap in his net and sets it aside. He tells you he has learned to fish in smaller waters where the tide is steady, even if the catch is less. For in those places, the water always returns. You look out over the moonlit flats, the horizon a thin silver line in the dark. Somewhere out there the tide still exists, but it belongs to another shore now. You turn away from the harbor, your steps light on the sand. Ahead, the land slopes upward toward a walled garden. From a distance, you can see the silhouettes of trees, their branches heavy with leaves. But as you draw nearer, you notice patches of dryness, petals curled inward, leaves fading at the edges. This, warrior, is where the seventh and final sign waits, a place that could bloom in beauty, but is left untended, allowing quiet neglect to take root. The walled garden rises before you, its iron gate cool beneath your hand. It swings open with a slow, gentle sound, as though it has not been moved in many days. Inside, the path is lined with stone, but in places the moss has begun to grow over it, soft and unchecked. Warrior, some harm is not loud. It does not strike or shout. It simply looks away and lets what once lived between two hearts fade. This is the seventh sign, a refusal to tend to the bond, allowing silent neglect to take root. You walk deeper into the garden. Once, it must have been beautiful. Roses now hang their heads, their petals dry at the edges. The fountain at the center still holds water, but the surface is still, the sound of flowing life absent. The air smells faintly of earth, not fresh and green, but heavy with the scent of things left too long unattended. You recall what the Stoics taught about maintenance, not only of the body and mind, but of relationships. They believed love and trust are like living things. They require intention, care, and the quiet acts that keep them alive. But some will not tend to the garden. They will walk its paths and enjoy its shade, yet ignore the wilting leaves, the weeds pressing in, the cracks forming in the stone. They may tell themselves that a garden can survive without work, or that if it truly mattered to you, you would tend it alone. Warrior, this is neglect not born of forgetfulness, but of choice. It is the decision to let disconnection grow, to avoid conversations that might be uncomfortable, to turn away from the small repairs that keep the bond whole. The danger is in the slow pace. You may not notice the decline day by day, until one morning you find the flowers gone and the soil hard beneath your feet. You pause beside the fountain, trailing your fingers across the water's surface. It is cool, but stagnant. You imagine what it might be if the flow returned, the sound of water falling, the air freshened by its movement, the plants bright with life again. Such renewal is possible, but only if both hearts choose to tend it. The Stoics would remind you here that your duty is to your own virtue. If you have given care, attention, and sincerity, you have fulfilled your part. It is not your task to force another to water the roots they will not touch. As you walk back toward the gate, you look once more at the garden. It is not beyond saving. Few things truly are, but it will not flourish by your will alone. Somewhere beyond these walls lies open, land, fresh soil, and the promise of growth with those who will walk beside you, planting and tending together. Warrior, you have now walked through all 7 signs, the shifting sands of words, the eclipsing of your light, the endless ledger of faults, the vanishing bridge, the mask of harmony, the tide that never returns, the garden that withers in silence. You carry these lessons not as burdens, but as lanterns. They will light your path when charm hides truth, when closeness feels far, when giving becomes one-sided, and when the silence of neglect tries to make you doubt your worth. The old city is quiet now. The river, the harbor, the garden, all fade behind you as you step onto a road that stretches toward the horizon. The air ahead is open and clean, carrying the scent of possibility. Warrior, guard your peace. Honor your worth. And when you meet someone who walks with steadiness, whose words and care align in both public and private, whose giving matches their receiving, and whose heart tends the garden alongside yours, you will know. For that is where the soil is rich, the bridges are strong, and the light never dims. If these signs have opened your eyes, share them. Let another warrior learn to see clearly before their spirit is worn thin. And if you are ready for more paths of wisdom and strength, subscribe, stay close, and walk with me again.